El título de mi charla se llamaba La prostitución del INSAI. Y si se dieron cuenta, he hablado en tiempo pasado. Se llamaba La prostitución del INSAI. Este fin de semana, mientras estaba preparando la presentación, recibí el mail de un amigo. En ese mail me adjuntaba un link de un video que quiero compartir con ustedes.
Throughout history, mighty empires have risen and fallen. The Mayans, the Romans, and in recent history, this empire. MP S&C Worldwide, an advertising agency, but not just any agency. This was the last advertising agency on earth. At one time, this was a vibrant, thriving organization. But then one day, the people who worked here disappeared in an instant. Gone. This office has been preserved just as it was found after everyone vanished. We can even see what they were doing when that moment came. Filling in timesheets, getting another coffee, playing foosball. They were carrying on as they always had, ignorant of a great change going on all around them that would soon destroy them all. And this was it. The consumer, to whom agencies had force-fed their brand messages for decades, stopped being passive. This was the catastrophe. Because now the consumer could actually choose what they wanted to see, not what the advertising agency forced them to. But still, agencies like this felt invincible. So they ignored these changes and held fast to the things they knew, like this thing. And these things. And this. But most of all, they clung to this, the television commercial, even when clients begged for new, non-traditional ideas. So they simply repurposed their print ads into clever rich media banners and glibly suggested that everyone have a Twitter feed. In agency after agency, the story was the same, until at last not a single advertising agency was left. So much was lost because of arrogance and ignorance, and because they chose to ignore the changes going on all around them. But in the end, the reasons don't matter. What matters is there were people once in this advertising agency, then one day, there weren't.
Bien, después de ver este video, seguí trabajando en la presentación que estaba haciendo sobre los insights y la primera pregunta que asaltó mi cabeza fue, ¿qué estoy haciendo? Porque yo puedo teorizar sobre los insights y puedo hablarles a ustedes sobre cómo se malinterpreta el insight en publicidad, ¿no es cierto? Y podemos pasarnos los 50 minutos, 60 minutos de esta charla hablando del insight, pero evidentemente que en la publicidad hay un problema muchísimo más grande. Yo me dije, voy a ir el miércoles a hablar con los chicos de ISIL, voy a teorizar del insight y de cómo se está usando mal en publicidad, cuando lo que está a punto de desaparecer es la publicidad. O sea, es como si se estuviese hundiendo un barco, ¿no? Y yo me pongo a putear a los marineros porque reman mal. Primero salvamos el barco y después arreglamos el tema de los remos. O sea, me parece que es el fenómeno Huáscar Atahualpa, ¿no? ¿Por qué pelearnos entre las agencias? ¿Por qué pelearnos entre marqueteros o creativos sobre qué cosa es un insight? Tú lo usas mal, no, tú lo usas bien, tal agencia es más creativa que otra tal agencia. Cuando el problema es más grande, nos vamos a quedar sin industria. Y ustedes, los estudiantes de comunicación, son el futuro de la comunicación en este país. Entonces, yo creo que, no sé si alguien se los ha dicho, pero alguien les tiene que decir la verdad. O sea, alguien tiene que decirle cómo son las cosas. Por eso es que me atreví, y espero no decepcionar a los que están aquí, porque sé que se inscribieron muchos por el título de la charla, pero me pareció capital hablar de esto antes de hablar del INSAI, ¿no? Regreso al punto en el que creo lo más importante que puedo hacer yo es, desde mi experiencia, contarles cuál es mi punto de vista de lo que está pasando hoy en publicidad. ¿qué es lo que está pasando en la publicidad hoy en día? Evidentemente, y quisiera que nos pongamos nosotros en zapatos de consumidor, más allá de estudiante de publicidad, y la publicidad nos suena como un poco repetitiva, ¿no? Algunas cosas más creativas que otras, pero hay fórmulas pues que siempre se van a repetir. Entonces, ¿qué es lo que sucede hoy en publicidad? Hay muchas voladas, hay muchas noticias, hoy en día está sucediendo, ¿no? Hay muchos blogs en los que se habla sobre que la publicidad va a desaparecer, hay muchos marqueteros que dicen que las agencias de publicidad están destinadas a la extinción, algunos publicistas dicen que la publicidad va a desaparecer, otros dicen que no. Sin embargo, vemos que hay marcas que utilizan, sin utilizar publicidad, ¿no es cierto?, sin usar una agencia de publicidad y sin usar campañas, tienen un éxito espectacular en sus productos. También vemos productos que tienen un presupuesto de publicidad muy pequeño, tan pequeño que no le alcanza para trabajar con una agencia y sin embargo tiene un éxito espectacular, ¿no? Entonces, los marqueteros dicen una cosa, en la publicidad hay división, digamos, ¿no? El mercado está diciendo muchas cosas acerca de si desaparecen o no desaparecen las agencias de publicidad. Entonces, ¿quién es el dueño de la verdad, ¿no? ¿Quién está diciendo la verdad? ¿Los marqueteros? ¿Nosotros los publicistas? Evidentemente, para poder decir y para poder llegar al fondo de la verdad, me he prestado el siguiente video que quiero compartir con ustedes, que fue oro en la categoría de film, televisión, en el Festival de Cannes que pasó hace 3 meses. Luces, por favor. Siempre quise decir esa frase. Gracias.
Shut it. Here's a true story about a young lad named John. Just a local farm boy, but there was something special about the lad. A glint in his eye, a fire in his belly, a spring in his step. And one day, he went for a walk. Now this walk began when his father died. The year was 1819, and he was just 14 years old. Bereavement counselling. Well, these were the days when young boys were sent into the fields. The mills, the mines, tough times. But young John was smart enough to be lucky. His father's farm, where he was born and raised, was sold, and the proceeds used to open a grocer's. Big responsibility for the wee lad. His own shop in Kilmarnock, with his name on the door, John Walker, or Johnny, as the world now knows him. Back then, all grocers stocked a range of local single malts, but they could be a wee bit inconsistent. For John, that wasn't good enough. He began blending different malts together as a way of offering his customers a consistent, unique product. Now this backroom art quickly developed into a commercial proposition, and a very profitable one. And because there's nothing like a commercial proposition to stir the Scottish heart, it grew quickly into an industry filled with ambitious entrepreneur distillers. John thrived in this environment, and so too soon with his sons, Robert and Alexander, who joined him on his journey. The Walkers became the biggest name in a rapidly growing industry. They were unstoppable. In one bold bit of 19th century corporate raiding, they bought the famed distillery at Cardew, lock, stock and ensuring their supply of this silky single malt, and guaranteeing, more importantly, that none of the other big blenders could get their hands on it. But young Alexander wasn't content with being Scotland's biggest blender. Not ambitious enough for him, no. He convinced the ship's captains of Glasgow to act as agents for him, and drove the whisky bearing his father's name across the globe. By 1860, he had developed the square bottle. Now, with a label at an angle of precisely 24 degrees. No big deal, you might think, but you'd be wrong. The square bottle meant less breakages and more bottles per shipment. The diagonal label meant larger type, and together, that meant Johnnie Walker had unmistakable presence on any shelf in the world. The bottle became an icon, and the rich liquid it contained sought after and consumed across the globe. Quite a character, Alexander Walker. Master of the blender's art. Ambitious, uncompromising, Mr. Walker. It was John's grandsons, George and Alexander II's turn to join him on his journey. They led the brand into the 20th century. By 1909, they had developed the iconic red label and black label, and persuaded Tom Brown, the best young illustrator of the day, to sketch a striding man in a napkin during a business lunch. In the stroke of a pen, the Victorian grocer was transformed into an Edwardian dandy. By 1920, Johnnie's walk had taken him through 120 countries, and he continued walking through the brand's advertising over the next 50 years, into the fabric of global culture, deep into the dark hearts of several wars, to the pleasure palaces of the aristocracy, immortalised by screen legends, celebrated by filmmakers, singers, songwriters, novelists, shoulder to shoulder with the great sportsmen of the age, winning countless international awards for quality, and even being awarded the Royal Warrant by King George V. No going back after that. Not that going back would even have occurred to Johnnie or any of his family. By the end of the 20th century, the familiar red label and black label were joined by the green label, the gold label, and the grandest of them all, Johnnie Walker Blue Label. By the beginning of the 21st century, Johnnie Walker wasn't just the world's biggest whiskey brand, but an international symbol of progress. The brand's keep walking mantra, adopted by pro-democracy protesters and parliamentary speechwriters. What would the farm-born Victorian grocer have thought of all of this? He'd have loved it. A Victorian farm-born grocer he might have been, but he and the family that followed him were possessed by a fiery ambition with the skill and intelligence to match. 200 years later, and Johnnie Walker's still walking, and he's not showing any signs of stopping.